Often people ask me how I have been able to write over 60 books in my life. I have at least a dozen of them in online. I am not very sure if I'll be able to complete any of them. For example, I did a lot of work along with Ravi Mathai and Uday Parikh in earlier years at IMA, which was later called as the Javaja project. So recently, almost about 40 years after the project was undertaken, I sent a group of IIM Udaipur students to revisit Javaja and identify what has happened to various families that participated in the project. The same way, in 1975, I studied the worker client transactions of health and family welfare workers in Uttar Pradesh, in Sultanpur district, in two of the primary health centers, Amethi and Kurebhar. We actually use it to go there, uh, accompany the workers to the villages, and understand the way they transact with customers in order to influence their health as well as family planning status. In those days, the focus was on family planning. So this was a 1975 project, and we had to stop the project in between because of emergency and a lot of tensions that have got arisen in those areas due to pressure on health and family planning workers to promote family welfare measures and things like that. So again, after 43 years, I was interested in seeing whether there is any change in the behavior of the health and family welfare workers as compared to 1975. Of course, most of the workers were not traceable. The entire health and family welfare situation has changed, and this was an interest, and therefore the students went there and visited some of the villages and documented. Now, these are two different books. If I spend time, I will be quite happy to write on this. There is a third book which uh, I used as a summer trainee from Nirma Institute. She spent about 2 to 3 months looking through all the correspondence I had beginning 1985, when the entire national HRD network was conceptualized, to the kind of efforts we made in terms of starting the HRD newsletter, in terms of registering the uh, national HRD network, and also later on the idea of the Academy of HRD and the registering of the academy, the way we promoted the Academy of HRD and so on. So this is another book I think that is in the offing. So like this, if I start counting all the experiences, I think there are a number of things. Post my last book on effective people, I felt that there are many other people who are institutional builders whom I should cover. In fact, I used another summer trainee, and this particular summer trainee interviewed a large number of people, including people like Joe Philip, Indira Parikh, who are good institutional builders. And then we have another 15 to 20 case studies of people who made a difference in the lives of others. So that will be another kind of a book. So I have at least about a dozen books in online. But at this point of time, I must confess that I am not in a great mood to write. I think 60th book. The last book was Effective People, that was followed by a book which we have done in memory of Dr. Uday Parikh, HRD, OD, and institution building. So I felt that I have reached a sense of fatigue, and therefore I may not at this point of time want to do any more books. But at some point of time, when I am relieved of my fatigue and I am ready to shoot off, I might shoot off and do some more work. So hopefully the 60 number will increase to 70, 75. Now this is not a target at all. This is just a possible kind of a thing. Now coming back to the question with which I started, that how am I able to do this? I would like to attribute to a set of factors which are largely, one can say, a combination of factors. First, I would want to acknowledge the contributions of Osmania University. As a student there, in this first year itself, there was a bulletin published by the Department of Psychology called Psychology Bulletin. for which they encouraged us to write articles. So my colleague Harigopal and I worked on it and then prepared an experiment. We conducted an experiment on size constancy. Size constancy is a phenomena that when you see an object from nearby or from a distance, still your perception is of the same size. Now, how come that although your images in your eye change, but you still perceive an object as of the same size as compared with, the image that gets formed in the retina and so on? We studied and then we published. That was my first publication. Of course, I must say I use it to also publish small Telugu articles in some of the local magazines at Andhra Loyola College. Not too many, but a couple of them. Try to make some stories. I don't say that I'm greatly imaginative story writer in those days. So there is something like a kind of a penchant for writing. It was there. I mean, this is simply looking back. I can talk about it. Uh, then immediately after that, I think good part of the credit goes to Uday Pari. When I started working with Uday, I think all the work that we have done on mental health of school teachers and other things, which we published as motivation training for mental health. Then Uday prompted me to do the Indian Applied Behavioral Sciences abstracts, uh, which I think single-handedly I had summarized all the various journals available in Delhi, and then came up with out of 250, almost about 247 abstracts were done by me, and the first issue of the Indian Behavioral Science abstracts came up. So to some extent, I would attribute, I think, also this penchant for writing to my training and the desire, the inner desire, uh, which I had, which was ultimately nurtured by, to some extent, by Uday Parikh. So as soon as I moved on to Udaipur, Uday and I undertook a project called the Handbook of Psychological and Social Instruments, and then he made me a co-author also of the status study of behavioral science research. So these were, I think, initial days when somebody, a senior uh, mentor, you call him, or a guide or a professor, keeps encouraging you to write, and then you have that internal penchant for writing. I think that has set in motion uh, a kind of a drive to write. In addition to this, I must say that I must give a almost about 70 to 80% of the credit for my writing books to the Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad. I was fortunately recruited as a faculty research associate. In fact, the year after I joined, I wanted to teach, and somebody from OB area went and complained to Professor Samuel Paul, director, that TV Rao wants to teach, whereas you say he has been recruited to do research in education. So why don't you tell him not to volunteer for so much of teaching? So director called me and asked me that, look, TV, it seems that you are wanting to teach. I think whatever you're teaching is enough. I started a course of laboratory and entrepreneurship, and we're sharing another course on consumer behavior with Sesame Shah. So Professor Paul said that is enough. Focus more on research. Maybe I think this is something that has helped me to focus more on research, and therefore I think I continued the stream of writing. It was at this time the laboratory and entrepreneurial motivation resulted in Uday and I in evaluating the entrepreneurship development programs in Gujarat, helped us to write another book called a handbook of trainers in entrepreneurship management. So that makes the third book, and my own PhD thesis on medical college environment came as a book called Doctors in Making. So these were the four books. The first to be seen in print is a status study of population research in behavioral sciences. Second was the Handbook of Psychological and Social Instruments with Uday Pari. Third was the Handbook of Entrepreneurship Development for trainers. Then I think the fourth book was when I returned from Bharat at Movers, we designed the HRD system in Larsen and Toubro. I have had first-hand experience of implementing it. We conducted a workshop, and we felt that we must write this in the form of a book. So then came a book called Designing HR Systems, for which Uday provided the conceptual base and I the experiential base, borrowing a lot of experiences from Bharat at Movers and other organizations we were working with. I was also simultaneously writing anything that I pick up as an idea, and I feel the environment is, I'm not satisfied with what is happening in the environment. I become restless. I must write and put it in the form of an article. A few years, 3, 4 years after the HRD movement came into our HRD department was established, people started asking, what is new in this? I mean, it's the same old wine in a new bottle. So I wrote an article called Is HRD a old wine in a new bottle? Same way, I was introduced uh, to assessment centers by Manohar Nadkarni, who used to work with David McClellan. I knew about Manohar Nadkarni when I was working in SIT Institute, but never met him. When I was in Delhi, Manohar returned, and Manohar, Uday, Somnath, Prayag Mehta, Jay Moja, all of them started a body called Behavioral Science Center. So when the Behavioral Science Center started, Manohar gave me an interesting book called Failure of Success, where he also talked of assessment centers. I picked up, read the book, and I started asking my question, why am I not doing assessment centers? And first thing I did at IIM was to introduce an assessment center approach for selecting project leaders of the Gujarat Entrepreneurship Development body. And immediately I wanted this to be disseminated. I wrote an article called uh, Use of Assessment Centers uh, in Recruitment and Selection and things like that. I think these were the beginning years of my starting of the writing, the spree for writing and so on. Then came in 1978 an opportunity to evaluate the adult education program. When the adult education program was evaluated, Ramarao, Anil Bhatt, myself actually used to go and live uh, in rural Rajasthan, visit some of the NGOs, stay with them, and then it was a great experience. At the end of it, we wrote it in the form of a book, Adult Education for Social Change. Then Uday and I went to Malaysia to develop a group of trainers at Mara Institute of Technology at MID of Malaysia. And as we started training them, we found that it is not enough to train a group of people. It is important to leave documentation for them. So we wrote this book on experiencing, developing motivation through experiencing, which is largely based on our Malaysian experiences. And that was something which it resulted in entrepreneurship development. So that was another kind of a book. That was the time we also were planning to teach OV in IIM Ahmedabad. And that led for Uday Parikh, Pastanjali, and myself to think of writing a textbook for them. So the behavior process in organizations came into existence. It was around this time Uday Parikh and I went to do some work for the UNESCO on developing a handbook for trainers in management. Putting all these things together, UNESCO encouraged us to come up with a handbook. So there was this handbook of trainers in education management. So these were the initial few books. I think this accounts for almost the initial 10 books between 1973 and 1982-83, which have set off a trend of writing in my own kind of a mind. I will tell about the rest of the books in my next talk of what is responsible for me to be able to write so many books. But I will stop at this point of time as it has already become a long video of over 14 minutes. Thanks for listening and get inspired by it. And if you can be an author, nothing like it.